What's new, everyone? Chris Osberg here, Winding Road Magazine. Today I've got the 2017 Ford Fusion Sport. Check it out. I do happen to be a fan of this deep red color. It's a similar color I have in my own personal F-150. Now, I've been looking forward to this review out of, let's call it curiosity. So, the Fusion Sport is the most powerful, the sportiest trim level in Ford's Fusion line. That is a sedan here in the US. Personally, I do like the styling. I'm a fan of, some people accuse it of being a little bit like Aston Martin on the front end. But overall, I think it's very striking, very elegant, and it's a good looking car. It's been doing very well for Ford. And the Fusion Sport is, let's say, the hopped up performance version of the Fusion line. Much in the same vein as the Taurus SHO. It has a V6 2.7 liter. Taurus has a 3.5, but it has a V6 EcoBoost engine, twin turbochargers, all-wheel drive. 6-speed automatic transmission is the only transmission option available. But with the awesome performance, enthusiast-oriented offerings that Ford has been cranking out these days, namely the Focus ST, Fiesta ST, Focus RS, GT350, etc., 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 it begs the question, what's this Fusion Sport going to be like? Is it going to have all the ingredients to make itself into, let's say, a gentleman's Evo or STI or even a Focus RS with 4 doors? Or is it going to be more Taurus SHO, just a big mainstream car with a lot of oomph? We're going to take a look at this thing, take it for a drive, and find out. Personally, I'd be really cool. I think it'd be cool if Ford would step into the luxury fast sedan market and come up with, let's say, a budget Audi S4. I think Ford has the capability of doing such. They definitely have the technology, the parts bin, the chassis engineers. I don't know. Let's check this thing out and see what we've got. You can see it has larger brakes than the standard Fusion offering. Deck lid spoiler on the back. Goodyear all-season tires. Let's see the sizing. Looks like 235 40 19, so fairly aggressive. Nice little EcoBoost all-wheel drive badge on the back. EcoBoost being Ford's direct injection turbocharged technology. This is the same 2.7 liter V6 twin turbo EcoBoost that you're going to find in the F-150, the Edge Sport, and probably other things in the future. So, quad tip exhaust, definitely sporty. Make no mistake, Ford definitely wants you to think it's a sporty car. So let's go ahead and take a look inside. See how it drives. All right, first off, you can see it's got kind of a mesh Alcantara type sporty trim for the seats. The seats don't have a lot of bolstering, and frankly, they are a little bit flat, so don't expect Recaros in this thing. But overall, the interior does a good job of convincing you that it's a sporty trim vehicle. Steering wheel, fairly good positioning. The brimming is a little bit, let's say, thin and soft. I would prefer a chunkier steering wheel, but that is a minor complaint. We've got Ford's Sync Connect or Sync 3 system here, and I'll front load a little bit here. It is vastly improved from the Ford Sync systems that you've heard complaints about in the past. Overall, it's a pretty good, pretty usable system. We've got a rotary shift knob down here. I don't mind it. It's okay. I think they could do a better job of, let's say, relocating it and putting this real estate you normally find a lever shifter in to better use. I mean, that's the real big advantage of using an unconventional shifter, is you don't need all of this space taken up here by the shift lever mechanism. But it feels nice. It's intuitive to use in terms of all of the creative packaging manufacturers are doing in the realm of shift levers these days. Not too many complaints over this one. Electronic parking brake here. Button here to activate the parking assist, and the rear view camera. Couple cup holders, USB connection, power connection down there. Center console, more USB, more power. They've done a good job of putting the things people want in a car. No complaints there. So let's go ahead and fire this thing up. Those familiar with Ford's products will be familiar with the overall layout. There's nothing new and surprising here. Nice analog gauge in the middle. You know, and I know it's kind of funny, but the gauge font that they use on this somehow reminds me of the DeLorean from Back to the Future, and I think it's kind of cool. So I like that little bit of nostalgia. Got currently, well, the way I have the gauge currently configured, there's a tachometer off to the left. It is a bit small. Kind of wish Ford would give you more of a tachometer option, but it's definitely better than not including it. Gas gauge, if I hit over to the side, you also get a temperature gauge. Let's try this. There it is. Fully up to operating temperature. Navigation, we can scroll through the stuff on this side. Phone, entertainment, navigation, and some shift paddles on the side and the back here. Gauge trim, or the belt line trim, it's kind of a fake carbon fibery thing, and it's no joke, or it's no secret, I'm not a huge fan of fake style trim. I'm a huge proponent of do it for real or don't do it at all. I know you can't expect real carbon fiber trim in a car at this price point, but I don't like the imitation stuff much either. So speaking of price point, it's not a cheap car. This thing has all the bells and whistles, and I'll talk about some more of that later. You really have a full plate of options in this car, all of the modern driver assistance technologies, infotainment technologies that you'd expect in even a luxury car at the reasonable price of about $41,000. So this thing's got 325 horsepower, a whopping 380 pound-feet of torque, and all-wheel drive. The all-wheel drive system being a Haldex style electronic clutch locking a permanently driven front axle. So even at full lock, you get about 50% of the torque at the rear axle. This is not a GKN style all-wheel drive system like you're going to find in the Focus RS that can torque vector actively or send more than 50% of the torque load to the rear axle. So we're going to have some reasonable expectations in terms of chassis dynamics and how much rotation this thing will do. Right off the bat, let's go see what happens when you give it the beans and turn it to the side. Let's see if this thing gets sideways at all. Ford doesn't make it that easy for you to do because there's no button here to quickly turn off the stability control or traction control. You actually have to go in the menu, go to driver's assist, traction control off, and that's all you get. So unknown at this point if the stability control is also off, but I think we're about to find out. So rear view camera, pretty clear. I like it. It's got the proximity sensors here. Go to drive, we're going to go to sport. We're going to need maximum sportiness for this attempt here. I'm just going to crank the wheel. No. So this all-wheel drive system doesn't have any locking differentials. So both the front and rear differentials are open, which resulted in the front inside tire and possibly the rear inside tire just spinning its brains out and not propelling the car in any direction. Yeah, that's a whole lot of understeer. We'll try a little bit more favorable surface to get the tail out, but at this point I don't think you're going to be doing much dry pavement hoonage action like you would with a Focus RS with this Fusion Sport. All right, before I get in any trouble here, let's go ahead and drive ourselves out in a reasonable manner. So somebody's been doing some burnouts out here. Going back to the all-wheel drive system, it may not be the trick GKN torque vectoring system that the Focus RS has, but it does do a decent job of sending torque to the rear axle to keep the car stable, to keep it or prevent it from torque steering, and overall putting power to the ground. I think that's what most people interested in this car are really going to be looking for. They're not going to be hoonigans like myself. And I bet in the snow it's reasonably fun to drive as long as the stability control lets you get a little goofy with it. So that engine noise you hear, it is mostly synthetic. You can hear that it's clearly projecting engine noise through the car by means of either a dedicated speaker or speakers in the audio system. I'm not quite sure which, but it's overall not too distracting. I don't mind it on this car. Interior quality is pretty decent. Remembering though that this car is encroaching on the $40,000 bracket, meaning your expectations for build quality do start to escalate at that point. It's a well put together car. Panels seem to fit okay. The materials seem to be durable, and sometimes luxurious when possible. And the switchgear all seems to operate well. Doesn't really feel flimsy. The infotainment system has a nice feel to it. It feels fairly quick, fairly responsive. The graphics are nice. No real complaints. As we're pulling away from the red light, I can voice over one of my minor complaints with the powertrain calibration of this vehicle. Ford has applied a very, let's say, hot throttle to the calibration of this car, meaning the throttle is extremely sensitive. So you give it about 20% throttle and it's giving you about 80% thrust. It's the oldest trick in the book in terms of making a car feel sportier than it is to a mainstream buyer. I don't think it's necessary in this car. This car has got plenty of punch. You don't need to give it that super hair trigger throttle, because ultimately, especially when you put it in sport mode, it makes it a little bit difficult to drive smoothly, a little bit more difficult to modulate the power smoothly. I mean, I'm cracking the thing open at 10-15% throttle and it's running all the way up to 4,000 plus RPM. A more progressive throttle is what you really want in the application. Something, that's sensitive is just good for impressing non-enthusiasts in test drive environments. I don't like that so much, but that is what some people want, though, and that's probably why Ford did that. It will make people think, ooh, this car is fast, but I digress. Transmission-wise, it's okay. It's smooth. It shifts gears most of the time when you want it to. Sometimes you get kind of a weird CVT, torque converter, slipping sensation during, let's say, passing maneuvers at highway speeds. The paddle shifters, not the most useful things in the world. So, the capability of this driveline to rev match and give you downshifts when you're, requesting high RPM. So let's say you want to come down into second or first gear. It blocks out most of your shifts. It doesn't let you shift down into first gear until you're going almost at a crawling speed. It's kind of slow to respond. You can tell it's not a real sport-oriented transmission. Let's go ahead and downshift, fourth, third. It's giving me second, but it won't give me first. No. It's not a substitute for a well-calibrated dual-clutch transmission or even a 8-speed ZF when ZF is on top of their game in the more sportier cars. It's more like, hey, we're going to check off this box that we've got shift paddles too. See, won't give me second. There we go, second. Overall, the transmission logic itself for what gear it chooses when you leave it to its own devices is pretty good. So ultimately, I don't see much reason to even use those shift paddles. Let's talk about the suspension for a minute. So I don't want to say it's a disappointment. I will say it's focused towards a different buyer than I was hoping for a Fusion Sport. It's a very comfortable ride, but in terms of sportiness, the body control is not very firm or sporty, or let's say, frankly, good. The body moves around a lot. You get quite a bit of floaty feeling when you're going through the bumps and the turns. It doesn't have a lot of body roll, but the body just kind of wallows around a bit. It does not give you that tight button down feeling. And ultimately, it doesn't feel that sporty. It feels sporty in a sense that it's got a lot of motor, so when you really boot it, kind of scoots down and the bow rises like a power boat, and you're off. But if you're going to be taking corners fast, it's kind of wallowy, and you're not going to mistake it for an STI or a WRX or anything else that's actually sporty in the sports sedan segment. It's definitely more towards the comfort end of the spectrum. So a Focus RS, it is not. Braking performance, the brakes actually feel pretty good. Pedals firm, it's got a nice initial bite to it. I did a couple high-speed stops before. Came to a stop stable, drama-free. I don't think these brakes are going to be up for racetrack duty, but in terms of confidence-inspiring braking performance for the average street driver, they're good, no complaints. Steering is another mixed bag, so kind of feels like your typical mainstream appliance. The steering is rubbery, turn-in is okay quick, but the feeling is very rubbery, and there's a bit of disconnect here. It's not a car you're going to jump in and say, I'm going to go carve some corners. It's definitely something else. It's more Fusion than Sport. Let's put it that way. Kind of wish there was more adjustability, you know. A lot of cars these days are offering different steering response modes, which is, you know, could be variable ratio, could be variable feedback firmness, it could be both. Maybe a firmer suspension mode. I think if Ford, you know, if this was a comfort calibration, I could be kind of okay with that. And if they had a way to button it down a little bit, make it firmer, and make it a little bit more sporty, it would go a good ways to making it more into a legitimate performance vehicle. So overall, the usability of the Sync 3 or the Sync Connect system is pretty good. I like that they have some hard buttons for the commonly used climate components. Everything seems to be pretty responsive. You can get back through the different menus here. Audio-wise, it is a Sony branded system, and to be quite frank, it's not all that great for a premium system. For a $30,000 car, it's acceptable. For a $40,000 car, it's not that good. You listen to, let's say, the Bang & Olufsen system in a A3 or S3 at a similar price point, and it's way better than this. But I don't know. Maybe I'm being too picky with it. Overall, I think Ford has done a good job of improving the system from the earlier days. It's much more responsive now. It does have Apple CarPlay integration, which I'll pull over for a second up here and go through it. I think it does a pretty darn good job of integrating with an Apple product. One kind of nitpick I have in terms of the CarPlay performance is once you activate the CarPlay, it's kind of a pain to get out of it. So I would like to see some sort of button on the CarPlay screen that allows you to easily back out of CarPlay and maybe use the car's onboard systems instead of just being stuck with the Apple environment. So let me go ahead and plug in this USB. The USB connection is kind of finicky here. Probably didn't use the highest quality connector, but it does not want to get in there sometimes. You can hear that. That was a little bit tough. All right, so let's go ahead. Let's see. Here we go. CarPlay's connected. We're going to go with continue. We're going to agree. We don't care about 911, but here we go. So Apple CarPlay. Graphics are nice. It's responsive. You probably got some more apps you can download.
Would you like?
See, look at that. We got some messages. Got the button there. Like I said, the only complaint I have at this point is now if I want to go to the car's navigation system or change a radio station or something like that, what do I do? Hitting the button here just leaves me with Siri. Let's see. And there's not an easy way to back out of this thing at this point. So there we go. I guess you can hit the sound button. That's not the most intuitive thing. I'd prefer a little home button there while I'm using it. Now I got to figure out there's CarPlay there. So, okay. The ride is pretty comfortable over this broken pavement, so that soft feeling you get out of the suspension does have its benefits. It would be a good car as a cruiser on the highway. I could definitely see driving this thing for long periods of time, especially like on a road trip or something, and be pretty comfortable in it. So although it's not the corner carver I kind of wanted, it certainly has its benefits in terms of comfort. Let's go ahead and merge onto the highway here and see if we can test out the acceleration. So I've got the transmission switched to sport mode. I have the traction control turned off. Let's go wait for traffic to pass here. See if I can get myself a full throttle acceleration run. All right, power brake. Overall, not bad. I got a little chirp from the front tires there as I hit the torque converter stall speed just right before the electronics cut the power. Would like if the all-wheel drive kind of preloaded the system, knowing that I was going to launch the car and was able to transfer more torque to the back. It did feel a little bit more front-wheel drivey than I'd want in that situation. But overall, you could tell there wasn't much wheel spin, and this is a pretty powerful car. Transmission performance, in a sporty sense, it wasn't all that great. So the transmission, really, I think the transmission is what holds down or holds back the drivetrain in this car. The shifts are kind of fluid, kind of sloppy. They're not tight, they're not sporty. Once you get into third gear, you get kind of like this torque converter, CVT, not directly connected feeling to it. It's like a transmission that doesn't quite know how to cope with all this power I'm putting into it from this 2.7 liter twin turbo EcoBoost engine. I think the transmission is ultimately what's holding back the sporty characteristic of the drivetrain and even the acceleration numbers. You look at other cars with this kind of performance or this kind of horsepower, and they're putting down a little bit quicker times than this. I would wager something like an S3 would blow the doors off of this car. It is a smaller car, but an S4 as well. So an Audi S4 B8 is 333 horsepower, about the same weight, and feels a lot quicker than this thing, especially with that DSG quick shifting transmission. So when you're looking at a car, let's not lose track of the sight that this is a cheaper car than the S4. On paper, it may seem comparable, but in actual driving experience, there's a few compromises that are going to hold back the performance of this car a little bit. So let's get back to the good part. So the engine, Ford, 2.7 is a good engine. It can move an F-150 around with a decent amount of authority. So it's no surprise that the Fusion with this engine feels legitimately quick. In the other video last night, I clocked off a 4.990 to 60 time in this thing. So it's if you get it out of the hole the right way, because the electronics, they want to fight with you a little bit, it will get up and run. There's a huge amount of mid-range torque. Ford rates it at 380 pound-feet of torque, and a lot of times with these boosted engines these days, torque might even be more than that. But there is no shortage of shove when you're doing, just mid-RPM passing maneuvers, getting into the throttle, getting on and off the line. There's a little bit of lag, but it's got a short first gear ratio, and it gets up and goes. And with the all-wheel drive, there's no traction issues, so you will have no problems finding those gaps in traffic. In terms of engine response, it is a little bit more towards the comfort side. A little bit rubber bandy, not in an offensive way. It's not terrible, but it's not a snappy, quick, responsive engine. It does feel like it has a lot of momentum to it with throttle requests. It kind of gets into the power, and it kind of is slow getting back out of the power. How about a quick impromptu 0 to 60 run, huh? Slight chirp from the front tires. All right, as we tried before, it doesn't want to do much more than understeer. Let's try it again. Oh yeah. Lots of front tire understeer. You can feel a little bit of torque being shifted to the back, but overall it's just gonna push with that front end, and letting off the throttle doesn't seem to help, doesn't seem to tighten the line much. It is an all-wheel drive system designed first and foremost for vehicle stability, traction in the snow. It is not gonna get this thing sideways. So once again, don't expect a Focus RS type driving experience with the Fusion Sport, which, Ford, I kind of wish you'd do one of those. If you put that all-wheel drive system in this car, gave it a little bit tighter button-down suspension, I think you could make a legitimate budget S4 fighter, or a gentleman's STI or Evo. Maybe the demand for such a thing isn't as good as I want to wish it was. Collision assist. Getting that, no, these systems tend to do that from time to time. You can see the car in front of me was clearly turning. It was already vacating the lane. But every once in a while, you will get a collision alert warning out of these types of systems. That's not exclusive to this Ford. Fortunately, this one didn't hit the brakes or anything. It just kind of gave me a little heads up that, hey, pay attention. So as long as it's doing that and just making me aware of the situation, 9 out of 10 times, it's probably a situation where I don't need to pay attention, but maybe 1 out of 10 it is. So kind of nice that the system is there, and it's going to make the driver very aware of such situations. So anyway, back to discussions on, I wish Ford would build a Fusion RS. I know they have the know-how. I know they have the parts and the parts bin. Maybe they don't think they have the demographic or the profit, let's say, business case for it. But, you know, it'd be kind of cool if they did, because this car ultimately is not shaping up to be that type of vehicle. It's more for the guy that wants a fully loaded, fully equipped Fusion and wants a little bit of power so he can kick it in the pants every once in a while and say, hey kids, watch this thing go, and have them go, woo, this car's awesome. But it's kind of a one-trick pony. But, you know, it is overall a nice car. It's got a lot of technology in it. It's a lot of car for the money. Checks a lot of boxes. But make no mistake, you're not getting yourself a budget S3 or S4 or, you know, 2 Series or STI or Evo with a little bit more leather. It's more of a comfort-oriented mainstream car that's got a lot of engine in it. So, with that said, that doesn't make it a bad car. That just makes it not the enthusiast's dream we were hoping it was. I hope Ford does well with the car. I hope they come to the realization that maybe there is an audience out there who would like to see this concept firmed into something a little bit more precise, a little bit more, let's say sporty. It's kind of cliche, but for lack of a better term, a sportier version of a Fusion Sport. If they did, I think they could really make something cool happen. So that's my opinion. Keep in mind that I am a die-hard driving enthusiast. That is, you know, a pretty biased perspective. There are going to be a lot of people who are just going to be driving this thing to work and back every day and probably be happy with it. It's a good car. I would recommend it to, you know, my dad if he was looking for a medium-sized sedan with a decent amount of power to it. So, with that said, I hope you enjoyed the review. Winding Road Magazine, Chris Osberg here. I will be coming back at you with plenty of other point of view drives, performance tests, and if you have any questions about the Fusion Sport or anything else, hit me up in the comments below. And thanks for watching. I hope you subscribe. Take it easy, and until next time, see ya.